Welcome to week 6, and only a couple of more weeks to go. So keep going, keep finishing strong. And I've enjoyed having you in the class, and I hope that you have enjoyed the last 5 weeks, and I hope you enjoyed this week, week 6, as we begin to talk really in depth about leaders in our student ministry and the importance of developing a strong leadership team. Let me say one thing about your notes. They're a little bit off in terms of the lesson number and the chapter number of the book. And so today we're going to be looking at, on your notes, it's probably going to say 14 and 15, and that is chapters 15 and 16 in the book. And we skipped one chapter in the book just intentionally, and so it's kind of throwing things off just a little bit with the notes. But so if you look at the title of each lesson with the handout that I provide for you, you can find that same title in the book Purpose Driven Youth Ministry by Doug Fields, and hopefully you can align both of those well together. Well, today we're going to look at finding the leaders your students deserve. Let me just say this up front, that leadership is something that all of you are going to have to find strong leaders in order to take your ministry to the next level. Leadership is important. If you do not develop a strong leadership team, if you're not actively going out and seeking leaders, you are going to limit the lid of potential that your student ministry can have. For instance, if it is just you and your spouse leading a ministry, you can probably run that ministry pretty effectively up until you get to around 20 to 25 students. But anything beyond that is going to have to take a leadership role in order to continue to see that expand. For instance, if you go to any student ministry in America that has 50 or more students in its student ministry, I guarantee you're going to find leaders that are helping the youth pastor out in that ministry. You're not going to find one of 75 and it's just him and his spouse. That's just not how it's going to be. So leaders are important, but they bring about challenges. You get a lot of different opinions. You get a lot of different preferences. You get a lot of different personalities. Recruiting and finding the right people and putting them in the right seat on the bus can be difficult. And so recruiting leaders and finding leaders is something all of you are going to have to actively be involved in, but it can be difficult. So in this lesson, we want to talk about finding the leaders that your students deserve. They deserve the best. They deserve leaders who care for them, who love them, who accept them, who commit to your value system that you've established, who understand and prioritize the mission that you're called to. And so we need leaders who are not just babysitters, but leaders who are there to minister. And so that's the goal. So letter A, you can't do this alone. You can't do this alone. All right, right in front of your computer, if you could, out loud. This might be weird if other people are in the room or at the house. I want you to say, I can't do this alone. 1, 2, 3, here we go. I can't do this alone. That is so true. I don't care if you're a senior pastor, if you're an associate pastor, if you're a student pastor, if you're a kids pastor. You can't do this alone. You have to develop leaders around you in order to accomplish the mission that God has called you to. So you have to actively find leaders. So number 1 on your notes, step number 1, think about your leadership attitude. Think about your leadership attitude. Your attitude about leaders will impact your methods of finding them. For example, do you value them? Okay, so if you don't value them and you don't think that they're that important, that's going to affect you going out and actively trying to find leaders. And so you got to find out, do you value them? Do you appreciate them? Do you think that you need them? There's all these different things about your attitude and how you portray your attitude towards leaders that is so important in developing leaders and finding leaders. Letter B, have an attitude that you need leaders to thrive. So your attitude needs to say, I need leaders to take our youth ministry to the level that God wants it to be taken to. You need leaders to thrive. You can't do it without them. And you have to have that leadership attitude in your own spirit, in your own mind, in your own heart, in order to really actively find leaders. Step number 2, shatter existing stereotypes. I wrote a blog. I used to blog a whole lot about youth ministry, and if you ever want to look at some of the archived stuff, I don't blog hardly at all anymore, but you can check it out at joshevans.com. And I used to blog a few years ago on youth ministry, like pretty consistently. And I can tell you that the best blog post that I ever had and the highest trafficked blog post that I've ever had was entitled "The 5 Myths of Youth Pastors." And in that blog post, I went to shatter some of the myths that church people kind of view youth pastors at. And it was things such as youth pastors are lazy, youth pastors are never on time, youth pastors couldn't become real pastors, so they became a youth pastor. Youth pastors, they didn't want to grow up, so they became a youth pastor just so that they could hang out with teenagers. And my point is this, there's some validity, I get it. I grew up in church, and I worked at a few different churches where there were a lot of stereotypes people accuse youth pastors of and things like that. But in this case, I want to shatter existing stereotypes of what you think you need as leaders in your ministry. For instance, if you were to evaluate right now, what kind of leaders do I need? You're probably going to think I need young, I need energetic, I need creatives, I need people who can relate, people who are athletic, people who are popular, people who are cool, people are, and it's all these different things. And none of those are necessarily bad. And some of them can make phenomenal leaders. So don't get me wrong. I'm not just degrading all of that. But you have to realize that there are some stereotypes that you have to throw out the window when you're recruiting and finding the right leaders for your students. So letter A, you need all types of leaders to thrive. You need all types of leaders to thrive. Oftentimes, the best leaders are not the ones you would have picked out of a crowd. And so I'm not joking. Some of my very best leaders were not ones I would have ever handpicked and gone out and found. Letter C, oftentimes the best leaders may surprise you. I had a small group leader. She was a lady. She was about 65 years old. She was a grandmother. And I kid you not, when I look back at the ideal small group leader, she comes to mind. Her face is in my mind. And she was an incredible leader because she cared for them. The students looked up to her. She shared wisdom. She loved them. She accepted them. She spent time with them outside of Wednesday night youth group. And so my point is this. It doesn't matter. She wasn't young. She wasn't going and skiing on our ski retreat. She wasn't jumping into the pool. She wasn't doing all these different things. She wasn't getting up and acting crazy and super creative, that kind of thing. She simply just cared for students, loved them, accepted them, and was there for them. And so you have to shatter existing stereotypes of what you think you need as leaders. Number 3, simplify your serving opportunities. Simplify your serving opportunities. Funnel your leadership positions down to a few key things. For instance, I wouldn't have 20 options for people to sign up to serve because that just seems overwhelming when you're recruiting, when you're going out and finding leaders. And so I would not try to, I'd simplify that down to small group leader, to upfront leaders, to creatives, to whatever. And I would funnel it down to a few main key objectives and positions that you're trying to recruit for. And then underneath each one of those, you can have specifics. Do you want girls? Do you want guys? Do you want a certain age, high school, junior high, whatever, and things like that. But I'd simplify your serving opportunities opportunity. Step number 4, never stop looking for potential leaders. Most of the time in student ministry, we like to have all of our leaders ready to go when school starts, when your youth ministry kicks back off, normally mid-August. And here's the truth. That's good, but I don't care if it's October. You should be actively recruiting and looking and finding key leaders that you could throw into your youth ministry at any given time. Expect existing leaders to find new ones. That's one of the best recruiting tools is challenge and motivate, inspire your current leadership team to go out and find and recruit people that can come and serve in your student ministry. So for instance, if you provide a great experience for a small group leader, they might go out and tell their friend or their family and say, hey, look, I love what I'm doing. I'm finding purpose and meaning. You need to come down and check out what God is doing in this student ministry. And then next thing you know, they want to serve in there. So expect your existing leaders to find new ones. Letter B, ask students to ask adults. There's probably no greater tool than this. If you can really get your student leaders to buy in and they probably know some adults within the church who would make really great youth leaders. I would try to get them plugged in. Letter C, look to parents as leaders. Don't be afraid of this. And, parents, I wouldn't put them as a small group leader for their own kid, but I wouldn't also not let them serve if their student was in our youth ministry. Letter D, utilize age-appropriate students. So, for instance, college students are awesome. I'm a big fan of using college students in our student ministry, but you might find that a freshman in college might not be ready for that role. And so you need to make sure that you settle on, hey, what's the best thing? For me, because I know you're probably thinking, hey, what would I do? Here's what always my policy was this. You had to be out of high school for at least 2 years. And that gives them a time to kind of remove themselves from the relationships that high school brings. And that's worked well for us. So you get some students in there who are ready to serve, who are mature, who want to be there, not just not wanting to grow up. Letter E, gather names from everyone. So if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I got somebody interested in serving in student ministry, listen to them. Don't just ride them off and things like that. Number 5, invite people to join your hands-on teams. Invite people to join your hands-on teams. Letter A, focus on the word invite. Focus on the word invite. I know I use the word recruit a lot, and recruit is a good word, and you should probably use that as well. But I would try to use this word invite when you're talking to people. I invite you to come serve. I want you there. And it communicates something a little bit different than just recruiting. Letter B, show off your non-stereotypical youth workers. So for instance, I would celebrate that senior citizen in my student ministry. I would say, look, this doesn't look like your typical youth ministry, young, crazy, that kind of thing, but she's one of our best. And I'd throw that out there so that anybody can realize, man, I can do this. If I really care and am passionate about students, I can do this. And so letter C, invite potential hands-on leaders to observe before they commit. One thing I would always encourage you to do is don't just get them to commit before they've observed. Make sure that they've observed before they commit. They need to see exactly what they're getting into. They need to look at the style that you're trying to do, the culture you're creating, the music you're playing, the curriculum and how you teach, their specific role and responsibility, what's expected of them. They need to see all of that before they commit. And so that's super, super important. Next chapter I want to look at is helping potential leaders become ministers. And I know I'm running through this fairly quickly here today. I feel like I say that every week, and I'm always around 35 minutes. Last week's was around 40 minutes. So I'm going to try to keep this one 20 minutes or less to help you out this week, to give you a little bit of a break, because I know some of you are getting ready next week to start possibly some more classes since the summer B term will be kicked off. So letter A, establish a hands-on involvement process. Establish a hands-on involvement process. Number 1, express interest. Number 2, have initial contact from someone on the youth staff. So this is the process before someone can kind of jump in and serve in our student ministry. They have to show interest, first of all. They need to have some initial contact with the youth staff. Now, here's the thing. I'm talking big. So if you're small, you have 20 people, maybe that's only you, and that's okay. But as you grow, you might have a point person, a leader that you've appointed that's their first initial conversation before they even get to you. Number 3, receive the youth ministry packet. I'm a big fan of packets. I know some people don't really believe in this, but here's the truth. Every leader that would serve with me, I'd present them with a welcome letter. It'd have their specific expectations and responsibilities week to week. Try to be as specific as possible so that they know what's expected of them. And then I would have an application in there, a commitment thing, and a little bit about them and stuff like that. So I would give that all to them, let them review it, let them see it. It'd have our mission, it'd have our values, it'd have everything on there so that they can know exactly what they're getting themselves into. Number 4, observe programs. Observe programs. I just mentioned this just a second ago. You want them to observe your programs. And number 5, complete the application. That's the first step. Now, just because they complete it doesn't mean you're going to approve them. There's been times where we've had to disapprove some leaders who were interested in serving our student ministry because of age, because of interest, because I just didn't feel like that they were a great fit at that right time. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing. Don't think you're a bad guy. I hate confrontation. That's just, I'm a natural people pleaser by nature. So it's difficult for me to have those kind of conversations. But what I've learned is you're protecting, as the youth pastor, you're the shepherd of that flock. You're protecting them from potential harm or from potential people that might not help them in this process. Number 6, interview with the youth pastor. This is when they come to you, the youth leader, the head guy of the youth ministry. They come to you and they have a one-on-one interview. You can ask them a lot of questions. This is when you should do that. You should ask them, what are they passionate about? What kind of wakes them up in the morning and different things like that. Prayerfully consider the commitment. Prayerfully consider the commitment. This is when you've had the interview with them, they've completed the application process, they've got through that. This is when you give them time to pray before they finally commit. Give them time to think about it. It shows that you're serious, but it also shows that they're serious in spending time with the Lord on that. Then they return the signed commitment sheet. And then number 9, they begin ministry. And listen, a lot of times in our student ministries, it stops there. When you get a small group leader in, it's done, you're good, you've achieved it, you've won, you get a gold star at the end of the day. But listen, let me encourage you to add one more thing. Number 10, that's to evaluate them. I would go back in for your new leaders after a month and I'd evaluate them. Maybe if you want a quarter, that's fine, or every few months, that's okay. Evaluate them, though. Don't just throw them into it and leave them assuming everything is good to go. And listen, if they're a high-level leader, they will appreciate evaluation. And so evaluate them. Letter B, how to encourage ongoing ministry. How to encourage ongoing ministry. Number 1, you have to assign specific responsibilities that have meaning and purpose. You have to assign specific responsibilities that have meaning and purpose. For instance, some positions we create in church, for a high-level, high-capacity leader, they don't want any part in it because it has no meaning and there's no purpose behind it. So make sure that you share with them if they're going to greet at a door, or if they're going to lead a small group or an assistant leader, if they're going to run the computer for the screens that you do, or the lights, or be a part of the band, or whatever. Here's what you got to understand. You got to communicate that, not just that they're filling a need you have, but that they are a part of our vision and mission, that they can find meaning and purpose into what they're doing. Number 2, continually communicate your expectations. Listen, what's frustrating for people is when you communicate expectations in August when they start and you don't communicate them for the entire year. I would revisit them. Every leadership meeting, remember, leaders, you committed to this. This is the expectations. This is what I'm expecting from you week in, week out. And so for you, this is super, super important. Continually communicate them. Don't let that stop. Put them in front of them. Possibly occasionally send an email out saying, hey, leaders, don't forget, this is what I'm expecting each and every week. Make sure you're doing that. Number 3, be liberal with praise. With praise. And just give it out, guys. I'm telling you, shoot a text message out. Every day you should have at least 2 people you're texting, and all you're doing is building them up, edifying them, making them feel good. And so for your leadership team, you need to be liberal with praise. Just continually shout it out. Wednesday nights, don't be afraid to have a leader stand and say, hey, they took an 8th grade group here and they did a great job. We appreciate what you're doing. Let's give them a hand, that kind of thing. Do it in front of the church on Sunday if you get that opportunity. It's great opportunities to praise and lift them up. Number 4, utilize veteran leaders. Utilize veteran leaders. Leaders who have been in it for a long, long time. They make out for great leaders. Utilize them. Don't just keep them at the bottom. A lot of high-level leaders want to move up the totem pole. Number 5, design burdenless staff meetings. Listen, staff meetings that are just filled with weight are not always good. You need to create staff meetings and leadership team meetings that leaders want to attend. Okay? Not ones where it's always talking about bad things, always talking about problems, always talking about what they're not doing, that kind of thing. No, you need to have those kind of conversations offline. Your staff meetings, your volunteer meetings, you need to basically be creating those where there's no burden in there. They can come, they can have fun, talk with one another, share their hearts, share their stories, and you can motivate, inspire them to accomplish the mission. And number 6, hang out together. This is where community builds amongst your team. You need that. Your students need it. And it's so, so important for your student ministry if you have that kind of camaraderie and community amongst your leadership team. Well, listen, that's all we got. You're doing a good job. And if you have any questions, don't forget, you can email me, jevans@tbc.org. And I would love to connect with you. I'd love to answer any questions about this course that you have and things like that. Or you can text me on my cell phone number. It's on Populi. And hopefully that will help you. Enjoy week 6. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.